And now I'm going to let people in. And then I'll begin remarks. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you join today's session. This session will be recorded and available for you on the Triton Connect Triton's conference hub later today. Before we hear from our speakers, there are a few housekeeping items to address. Please note that you'll come in on mute. That way we minimize any distraction. And then if you'd like to ask any questions of our panelists, please feel free to just use the Zoom chat feature. Also, just a reminder to please abide by our UC San Diego principles of community, which you can see here. Okay, well, that's all I have to kick us off. And now Laura will take over with the rest of the presentation. Enjoy.
Thank you, Eliza. And a big thank you to everyone who has joined us so far. We may get a few more trickling in here from our waiting room. I hope that of our attendees for this session, many of you have been participating throughout the day. We've had some fantastic sessions. If you're specifically a fan of Scripps, there was a cool one about the intersection of environmental and social justice featuring some Scripps alumni. And our Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiatives hosted our implicit bias training this morning. I hope some of you were able to participate. And just as we've had amazing speakers today and keynotes and panelists, we have another full day of awesome sessions tomorrow. And I hope that you will join for some of those as well by looking in our conference hub and registering. And those will be starting as early as 10. And then we'll have 2 other sessions as well and some networking and keynotes. So please make sure to sign up for those. And after this session, just a quick reminder that there will be a networking session for 30 minutes after if you'd like to stay and chat with some folks for that. So with that being said, and thank you for our housekeeping, Eliza, welcome to the From Sea to Stars, Women Breaking Ground in Scientific Exploration. And we've got amazing speakers. I'm so happy to have these 4 wonderful women joining us. And we also have a student moderator and happy to have her as well. My name's Laura Lothian. I'm the Alumni Director for Scripps Oceanography and Environmental Systems on campus. So I have the pleasure of hearing from these incredible people all the time behind the scenes doing amazing work. And today is a special opportunity for some of these people to be featured in the forefront. That have great stories to tell. So hopefully you get something out of this session and enjoy the stories as much as I get to on a daily basis. You'll see here we have our panelists listed, but first I would like to introduce our student moderator, An Nguyen. An, will you tell us a little bit about what you're studying and any student affiliations that you have real quick before we move to our panelists?
Yes. Hi, my name is An Nguyen, and I'm a 4th-year student majoring in biological anthropology. I'm a part of Student Foundation, which is a student org under the Alumni office, which is where my advisor recruited me for this panel. And I will be the student moderator for y'all today.
Perfect. Thank you, An. We're happy to have you. And with that, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and share so you can hear straight from them. And let's get that started. We are going to first introduce Lauren Ward. Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about where you are now, what you studied, and if you'd like to share what's going on in these cool pictures?
Sure. So I'm so excited to be back in this space with you guys. It's a bit of a homecoming, even though we're not going anywhere right now. But yeah, so I was class of 2015 to the MAS program at Scripps. And we studied oceanography, biological conservation. It was a program for people who were really on the interdisciplinary side of science. And so we had some straight scientists, we had some communicators, lawyers even, artists. So I came out of Scripps, and the first job I got was straight oceanography based. I worked at the Smithsonian under, Nancy Knowlton, who's a famous Scripser herself. And we worked in the ocean hall together, so it was perfect. But then at some point, you know, I had a friend in Washington, D.C. that said, hey, do you want to maybe apply for this communications job at NASA? And I was like, I don't do planets. I do this planet. You know, this is kind of like where I'm comfortable with my science. And they said, no, we want you to join the Earth Science team at NASA, which I didn't know that was a thing. There was a media group just around Earth Science. So I joined the Earth Science News team, and we are a collection of communicators who, you know, all have these science backgrounds: oceanography, physics, chemists are in the group, biologists, geologists. And so it's a group of, you know, Earth nerds who now do media about the best planet of all, Earth. So in a couple of these pictures, though, you probably noticed that one of them was not, although both were taken on Earth, fair enough. One of them is of the Mars rover that was just sent to the planet Mars. And that rover is actually going to be landing very soon. So that was an awesome project. It did have some Earth science tie-ins. I got to be part of it. The other photo, which you'll probably see in a minute, was a big NASA flight that basically we own a few of these big planes, and those planes do surveys over, you know, fire-laden areas, flood-laden areas. And so sometimes they have producers, video producers, jump on those planes and film from the plane window. So you'll see in that photo to the right that I'm about to get on this plane, and we were chasing fires in the western part of the United States. So that's a little bit about what I do. Now a full-time science communicator, but still very science, very, very close to my job and also to my heart.
Thank you. And that's really cool, all of that. Okay, let's go ahead and have our next slide here. Tammy, please. And Cindy, welcome, welcome. Happy to have you. I've had the pleasure of meeting Cindy in person at a reunion symposium we did a couple of years ago at Scripps. And Cindy, will you tell us a little bit about your experiences and what you're doing at NASA?
Yes, and thank you so much. It's really fun to be here and to be with all my fellow panelists. You know, Lauren loved the Perseverance rover, you know, February 18th, and the samples that it collects will someday come back to the Johnson Space Center, which is where I am. So
it's gonna be awesome.
Yes. So yeah, so a little NASA bonding here. So anyhow, I was at Scripps from 1977 to 1983. I got my PhD from the Geological Research Division. I studied ophiolites, and I also studied samples from the Marianas Trench and Back Arc Basin and did some comparative work. And so that seems like it's about as far away from the stars as you can get to be at the bottom of the ocean, but in fact, the rocks are kind of the same. That's the solar system. After Scripps, I taught for a few years. I was at Colgate University and spent a couple of years also at Lamont. And then I came to NASA, and I've been to NASA for more than 30 years. And I've done a bunch of different things over that 30-year time frame. I did Earth observations from the shuttle and the Mir space station, the International Space Station, and we feed products to people like Lauren. And it's so important for these big, you know, the American people own NASA, and it's really important to be able to communicate it. So it's great to have a co-panelist on this panel. So I did that. I did a stint doing actually engineering image analysis after the Columbia accident. We were part of the investigation team. I spent time in the curation office, and I managed the curation office. And one of the things that we do at the Johnson Space Center is we curate all of NASA's extraterrestrial samples. So the Apollo samples from the moon, meteorites from the asteroid belt. And these two pictures are from my second expedition down to Antarctica, where we collect pristine meteorites and bring them back to curate and provide them to the scientific community for study. And then I've also led the division that we're a small physical science division in an engineering center at the Johnson Space Center. And today we're putting together plans for future missions to the moon. And so I spend all my time helping do architecture studies and think through the operational concepts and the things that we're going to need to do, including training astronauts, people like Scripps alumni, Jessica Meir and Megan MacArthur and Kate Rubins, who hopefully will someday be walking on the surface of the moon, and being able to train them in helping to collect the samples and do the observations that will help us understand planetary evolution a little bit better. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for also mentioning some of our other Scripps graduates who are doing some of this work, and they get a lot of the spotlight most of the time, but I think it's really great that you have had experience training these astronauts, and the people behind the scenes are doing incredible work too. So this is really a pleasure. Let's go to our next panelist and introduce Laura Lilly. So Laura is actually a current PhD candidate, and Laura, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for the invitation to speak. And I'll just echo Lauren and Cindy that, again, it's really an honor to be here with you guys. It's so inspiring to hear everyone's stories and really hear about the amazing things that these women have done in science. So I am a biological oceanographer, and as Laura mentioned, I'm still a PhD candidate at Scripps. I'm actually defending my PhD in exactly a month. So if you're interested in zooplankton or El Nino, you can come watch it. So I study zooplankton in the California current system and how those communities change and how that might influence everything from protected whale species and seabirds to the fish stocks that we really depend on, and understanding kind of how the ocean responds to El Nino events. And these pictures here are from a cruise that I was on last summer. And it's actually a data set that I draw heavily from. It's the CalCoffee data set, the California Cooperative Oceanic Fisheries Investigations. And this time series has been going on for 70 years. They go out to sea 4 times a year. And I went out last summer, and it was obviously during the COVID era. So we were all masked up and a little challenged in the personnel whom we could get to come out to sea with us. But the cool thing about this cruise was that it was the first time that a CalCoffee cruise had ever had an all-female science party. There had obviously been many women before, but this was all female. We had to, we were completely running the show and everything. And I think the most amazing part for a lot of us was that we didn't even really think about it at first. We're women of my generation are used to just walking on ships and having it be pretty normal and just expecting to be treated equally. And I think realizing that we were an all-female science party and that this was such a monumental thing in 2020 really has made all of us appreciate so much more the efforts of all of the women who have come before us, Cindy and Karen, and even Lauren a couple years before me. And our cruise was on the RV Sally Ride, one of the Scripps ships. So it was very fitting that our first all-female science party was on a ship named for the first American female astronaut. So that was a really incredible experience. And one of my goals for science is to someday lead a program like CalCoffee or like some of the NOAA survey programs. So hearing the stories of women like Cindy and Karen who are really leading these charges, and Lauren in her experiences is really inspiring me to charge forward with everything I can possibly do. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm posting some links in our chat box for attendees if you'd like to check out any of these interesting programs, organizations. And there's a story here that features this first all-female cruise on RV Sally Ride if you'd like to check that out later. And Karen Wishner, will you please tell us a little bit about your background and some of your little tidbits you'd like to share about your graduation details and time at Scripps?
All right, thank you, Laura, and thanks for inviting me. And boy, it's wonderful to hear everybody's stories, amazing people. I was at Scripps from 1972 to 1979. This is a picture of me in that era. And I did a multidisciplinary type of thesis. My major advisor was John McGowan for zooplankton, so I really consider myself a zooplankton ecologist. But I went out to sea all of the time with the geologists and the deep tow group, and I put my little plankton net here on the bottom of their geophysical instrument and collected near bottom zooplankton. That was my my thesis work. After Scripps, well, I had a 1 semester or 1 quarter temporary job at Santa Cruz. One of the professors there, Mary Silver, called down to McGowan's lab and said, "Gosh, I'm up for tenure. Do you have anyone there who could teach my class for this quarter?" And with about 2 weeks notice, I drove up to Santa Cruz and taught Mary Silver's class, and you know, she became a wonderful mentor as well. And then, you know, the luck had it, and I got a job at the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography, and I was actually the first woman hired into a tenure track faculty position at the Graduate School of Oceanography. That was 1980, and I've been there ever since. And I guess you can move to the next slide now. There we go. So I've done a lot of different work, everything from submersibles and ROVs, but mainly what I've been doing these days is using a mock nest and sampling the zooplankton in the water column to look at some of the climate change issues, especially deoxygenation. And this is our basic instrument. It's got multiple nets here, but it's all computer controlled from inside the lab. And then you can see a few pictures of when the samples come up. They get poured through a sieve, and then here I am on the far right, the lower right there, putting the fresh sample into jars and preserving it. So it's a very active, just like others have described, very active process there to collect your data. And I guess you can move to the next one. So this is a picture of the kinds of things we collect, some of the fish and the shrimp. I actually study the copepods, which are some of the little red dots you see. And then I guess a little bit of the last slide. I didn't know about including a science slide, but what I'm studying now are oxygen minimum zones. These are the areas of low oxygen in the ocean. And the thought is with global warming, they're going to be getting thicker, they're going to be expanding. And there are a variety of different processes, zooplankton processes, that will potentially occur and that can affect food webs and even up to fisheries. So that's what I've been studying most recently. Also, I guess I should mention, I was also a co-PI on an NSF-funded initiative called Advance a number of years ago, and that was to recruit and retain women faculty. And so we actually, as part of that, helped to bring in some 10 other women faculty members, about 4 or 5 of them at GSO and other departments around the university, and now they're all full professors. So that program had a real impact on women at URI in STEM disciplines. All right, so.
Thank you, Karen. And those efforts are certainly continuing, I'm sure, at Rhode Island, and they're continuing at Scripps as well. It's a huge priority for Scripps. And I also noticed we have a very special attendee in our audience, a director of Scripps Oceanography, Margaret Leinen. Margaret, would you like to say anything to our attendees or our panelists? Are you still there? Well, that was impromptu, so we'll save that for the end, but it's a delight to have so many wonderful people joining this panel. Okay, let's move on to the heart of this session, which, oh I'm so sorry. can we unmute our attendees for a moment, please? Is that possible?
Sure. Yes, yes. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Margaret.
It is-
Welcome.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks to all of you. It is just, it is such a thrill to see you all back here for this alumni event. And I really enjoyed hearing from each and every one. And of course, Karen and I spent time at URI School of Oceanography together. So I had privately texted her about what a thrill it was to have her with us for this. I had also told Laura that her comment about for her generation, going to sea and having a lot of women on the cruise was normal. And it's taken much too long, but I'm just delighted that that's your experience now. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Margaret. We're so happy to have you here as well. All right, let's get into the meat of this session. I'm going to open this up to our panelist Q&A, and we will save about 15 minutes at the end for audience questions. So as our panelists are answering and speaking about some of these topics, please think of any questions you may like to include in the chat box at any time, and we're keeping track of those. And I will turn it over to you to begin our Q&A session with our panelists.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you to all of our panelists. It's really inspiring to hearing about your story and your experience. And I'm excited to hear more about your experience and your advices. So let's get right into our first questions. As we all know, over the years, women have traversed a challenging path of balancing educations, career, personal life, and family. How have you noticed this changing over the years at organizations like NASA and in academic positions? How has policy changed or not changed enough to support gender equity? And I guess, since we mentioned NASA, Cindy, would you like to start out?
Okay, so there's definitely been a change over, since I was a graduate student at Scripps in terms of being able to balance the world. And of course, coming, from oceanography, and I think it's true if you're teaching or at NASA, you feel like you work 24/7 and you do it because you love it, but still you have to figure out how to fit in the other bits of your life. I have 2 kids, they're grown now, but I can tell you that it was really, really hard when they were little bitties. I think I spent all my time just running them to the babysitter or to and from school. There was no on-site daycare. At the time I had to use sick leave for my maternity leave. There's a whole bunch of policies that are in place now that my younger colleagues, I think, are it's still hard. It's always going to be hard, but at least there are some formal policies in place now. And I think everybody recognizes the importance of daycare and school programs that are extended day school programs so that the whole family can do the stuff that they need to do to work and to be safe for your kids. So yeah, that there's been a lot of changes over the past 30-35 years, and I'm grateful for it, but there's still, it's still really hard. And I don't know how people do it right now during the pandemic, having to juggle families at home and work at the same time, all over Zoom.
Anyone else like to share anything about this? Karen?
I think Cindy said it very well. And I've had a lot of long cruises. I had one year where I had 4 month-long cruises in Jagos into the Arabian Sea, and certainly going back and forth. And I did not have kids, but it certainly did a number on my personal life. But that's also part of the fun of it. I mean, going out to sea, you have your close friends and colleagues there, and yeah. But I agree that the whole parental leave thing seems to be much more in action now. Also, you know, when I first started, women wouldn't even consider having a baby before they got tenure. And now it's very common in our department. You know, everybody's having kids, whether or not they have tenure, just as the time comes. And so I think that's been a real positive change in terms of work-life issues.
Yeah, and I think that the federal government, I mean, the federal government has to put it, has policies, and those are policies that have to be enacted. And, you know, and sometimes I think it makes it a little bit easier, and you can't, it's hard to mandate corporations, for example, on certain policies, but government institutions can enact things like family leave and, you know, and you know, and other kinds of accommodations to help their employees.
And of course, I'd like to add the men take family leave as well. So yeah, they're all happy about it also.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. Let's move on to the next questions about career advancement. There are many studies on gender equity in the workplace that have described it being more difficult for women to advance to position of leaderships. Have any of you experienced or observed this in your field? And Lauren or Laura, would you like to chime in?
I'm in first. I think it's getting more and more common. I think, especially, so I can speak to, more than I can speak to academia, I can speak to the media world, basically, you know, the producers who are putting together television shows or digital content and whatnot. And I think what we used to see a lot of was we'd have a fair few amount of women who all worked as a group, but then their boss would always be a man. And he was often a capable man. This is speaking nothing to, you know, his character or anything, but it was just a very common sight. I'm seeing now a lot more women in the industry, which is great because it used to be a very male dominated industry as well. But the fact that like more of them are becoming managers and sort of these high tier producers is really hopeful, because it means that the glass ceiling in that case was shattered and that there are now more and more. And what's great is a lot of these women understand their role in that ladder and lifting the next woman up. And so there is that shared responsibility of paving the way for others when sometimes they may not, you know, when you have fewer women executives, there's fewer women executive mentors. And so just the fact that there's a bigger volume of them has been very helpful in media.
Yeah, I can chime in from the academic side since I'm still on that side, but I think I have kind of a similar experience to Lauren in that I feel like we're sort of, I don't know, riding the edge of this groundswell where we are really starting to transition to having more women in these higher positions. And I think Director Margaret Leinen is a wonderful example of that. But personally, my PhD committee is comprised of 6 men, and they're all, you know, the experts in their fields. That's why I chose them. But I also chose them because they were kind of the only from, you know, they're from a previous generation where they were the only ones available for those areas of expertise. But as many of them retire, there are many new, younger faculty coming up, many of whom are women and people of diverse racial backgrounds. And Scripps has really made a big push for that to bring that in. And I think we'll start to kind of see that groundswell and that rise. And again, as Lauren said, I think, you know, having more women at every level is really important, but really getting women into these top positions is really where we're going to sort of help shift the balance to feel more equal. So I'm excited to see more and more of that.
Yeah, but I say that there's still a lot of work to do. It's surely there's a lot of work to do still. So I mean, you know, Karen, you and I were of the same era, and on the faculty at Scripps, it was Miriam Kastner.
That's fun times, yeah.
And she was all of our moms. You know, she mentored every single woman student, and regardless of what we ended up studying. You know, and you were the first woman on tenure track at URI. When I went to Colgate University, I was the first woman in the geology department tenure track. And you know, and that's a tough row to hoe, and it's definitely better for sure. But you know, I look at my department at NASA. It's still, you know, there's far more women than there had been. There's a lot more younger women, and that's great. And you know, there is, you know, and they're superstars. They're awesome, but there's a long way to go.
I'd like to add for GSO, we also now have a woman dean. Paula Bontempi, who just began a few months ago. So exciting. Yeah.
Oh, you stole her from our group.
Yes, she's great.
From NASA.
Yeah,
I was at Scripps. There were a few biology women. Pooh Venrick, who I think is still there, Elizabeth Venrick, and then Mary Silver had finished slightly before, and she was already at Santa Cruz when I was there. So there were a few women who, you know, we could follow. Yeah. So that was good. One thing I thought I'd bring up, though, about gender equity that I personally experienced is, yes, I was hired as the first woman, but I was also paid $15,000 less than the male assistant professor at that time. And now that has changed, because since then, there's now a salary scale and a union. And I remember there was one year I got a big raise because I was so far below the salary level that, you know, they were actually embarrassed. But so that has equaled out. And the other thing, you know, it used to be that women got fewer resources in terms of laboratory space or startup. And I think now, looking at certainly the recent hires at our institution, you know, people, men and women, are getting nice labs and good startup packages. So that has really sort of equalized over these years.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that really quickly, that we have noticed a lot more women being hired in our group, and they are a lot of young women. And one thing that the gals in my group who have been here a little bit longer try and often do is have a conversation with them early on. A lot of them are right out of college. You know, out of college, you're like, someone give me a job, I'll do anything. I will take any benefits at any rate. And one thing that we really try and do with them is to help them understand their worth, so that when they enter the workforce, they're not super behind a lot of the men in the group, because, you know, they don't negotiate a higher salary or whatnot. So that's an unofficial thing that some of the other women in the group have taken upon themselves to do for some of these up and coming people. But I mean, the groundwork has been laid by people like Karen and Cindy, by even making space for that kind of change, even in our industry.
Yeah, these days there's so many resources, and I certainly encourage any up and coming graduate to take advantage of them. Every scientific society has training videos, and you know, how to interview, how to negotiate, how to write your application letter. And I'm sure your own institution probably has that as well. And, you know, do it with knowledge. I mean, and plus with the internet, you can find out these different things. I mean, we didn't have anything like that, and you just walked in and you were totally, you know, ignorant of all of the situation. But now, you know, people know what to negotiate and talk to their friends and colleagues, and, you know, what do I need and how should I, you know, what should I tell the dean if I'm having a job interview, et cetera. So I take advantage of all of that mentoring and all of those special, you know, opportunities there.
Thank you all for sharing your experience. I know that you all mentioned that you have had a lot of great mentorships over the years that help you grow as a professionals. So were there any instances where you didn't have those relationships, didn't have those people to turn to? And what do you do?
I just to sort of mirror what Laura was saying earlier, which was that her whole committee is men, and that's because they're the best. So she's asked them to be part of her committee. It was the same thing with me. I noticed recently that most of my mentors were men, and that was not because I preferred having a male mentor. It's just like that was who was accessible to me. And I got my first female mentor a couple of years ago working at Smithsonian, and it was a game changer because she understood things that women encounter in the workplace that I had never perceived were going to be like an issue later on. And she had a sensitivity towards some of the unique challenges we have. And so I was very lucky. I've always had very, very smart and empathetic and compassionate people who care about my growth, looking out for me. And this woman really changed the game. But one thing she did say to me was that I'm doing this for you. At some point, you need to pay it forward. This is not a one-way street. You need to pay it forward to the people who come after you. So I've been very lucky with the mentorship opportunities I've had.
I can definitely second everything Lauren said. And I mean, mentors across the board are a game changer in anything related to science. It can be a really hard and lonely and isolating road, and hearing from those who have come before and knowing that there are people to commiserate with makes a huge difference. And I think, again, I've had wonderful male mentors, but I think what the more female mentors I've had have given me is perspective on things I maybe hadn't thought to think about before. Things like, when I want to have a family and start having kids, what the challenges of that might be like, and how to navigate. And even from previous conversations with Lauren and her highlighting to me some of the things that men might know to ask for that women might not know that they can ask for. Just sort of having people highlight those things and plant those seeds in my head has really, I think, prepared me to take fuller advantage of the resources around me. So yeah.
And I'd also like to add the importance of having a cohort of your peers. And I know when I was hired, I was the first sort of biology person hired in the last 14 years. And it was very lonely because, the other people were already kind of settled and had their families and whatever. And what we learned in the advanced program is that hiring a cluster of people at about the same, life stage and age category makes so much of a difference, because they have each other as well as more senior mentors. And the idea of having a cohort and hiring people in groups of at least some sort of thing of that sort is very important, it turns out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and it's the sort of thing that I felt like when I was a graduate student at Scripps, we had that, in spades. I think I mentioned earlier when we were talking that a couple of days ago that I was when I came in 1977, our graduate student cohort there was gender equity at that time, and it wasn't, there was just as many women graduate students as men, and we were all a big cohort clump, and that was great, and it was really hard, and I didn't even think about it when I had got my first job at Colgate, that how much I needed that and how much I missed that, and probably didn't even know to seek it out at that point in time.
Thank you, Cindy, for mentioning gender equity and like how it's shifting toward a better, more improved societies. So I know that we have had like a lot of policy that's advocating for women and a lot of programs too, but in a more personal, like societal ways, how can we shift our own perspective and our behaviors to support growth and the growth of others as gender equities continue to improve?
I'll go ahead and jump in with a thought, because I think, again, hearing all the excitement about our all-female Cal Coffee cruise last summer and participating on this panel and other similar things, really celebrating women in science, has really highlighted for me the importance of really celebrating diversity and promoting diversity. And I ask myself this question: what is our ultimate goal? Is our ultimate goal to sort of not talk about gender or race or different backgrounds or anything, and to just focus on people's scientific abilities or, you know, what they bring to the table? But I think especially now, and I hope into the future too, we do still talk explicitly about gender diversity and racial diversity, and really highlight, you know, that we have men and women and non-binary people and all different races, and what that diversity of backgrounds can bring, and how, you know, how that really contributes to our diversity of thinking and approaches. So I think we've talked a lot about mentoring, and like Lauren, I really intend to pay that forward, particularly to women who come after me, really make sure they feel welcome. But I think also really celebrating, sort of continuing to call out this diversity as we see it, and the rise of women, and not the rise of women at the expense of men, but, you know, the rise of everyone to kind of toward greater equality. So I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts.
Yeah, Laura, I completely agree with that. I think there's a real value in, there is something to be said about, well, you know, who's got the best scientific prowess? Like there is that in a category, but there is also tons of value in, especially media, in offering a sort of suite of different types of people to tell those stories, because I could not pretend to tell the story of a non-binary person or a person of color, or so having those people behind the camera and then also in front of the camera adds value that is, I think we're starting to more recently understand more about. And I mean, there's something to be said about seeing someone who looks like you doing the job that you never thought you could have. And shoot, you know, there's definitely been some women behind the camera where I've been like, oh, like, that's so unusual. Like, you know, when you see a female director or a female cinematographer, it always sort of stops you for a minute. You say, oh, my possibilities just opened up a little bit more. And that's in that representation.
Yeah, both of you said those things so beautifully, and it just warms my heart. And I know we also had talked about this earlier when we talked a couple of days ago, that you hear things in the media like, well, when it won't even become a thing in the news, like having 2 women do a spacewalk, when that nobody raises their eyebrows about that anymore, then we've hit, you know, maybe we've made it. But I really agree with what Laura said, that that it's so good to celebrate that, regardless, to be able to continually point out what everybody can do when they're at the table together, and to celebrate the successes for people who are doing firsts or doing things for the 10th time. So,
and I'd like to say I've tried to bring in that attitude in my teaching. For example, I teach an undergraduate deep sea biology class, and people from a bunch of different disciplines. And one of the things they all do is a project. They have to each develop a cruise plan and a hypothesis. And so it becomes kind of a psychological, you know, what animal are you interested in, and what does it do that's interesting, and how could you test this in the deep sea? And, you know, some of these people who have no concept initially really end up enjoying it and going on from there. So I think you can start at all different levels to kind of be inclusive, to try to bring people in and try to, you know, figure out what their interests are and how that can apply to broader interests in oceanography.
Yeah, one last thing about that is I feel like sometimes there's the idea that it's a pie, and if you take part of that pie away, then that leaves less pie for me. And I don't see it that way. And I think it's not a zero-sum game. And so I think inviting more people to the table is not necessarily preventing others from expressing their stories and their perspective. So thinking about it in a more generous way, I guess.
And with that, yeah, thank you all for sharing your experience and your advices. So I would like now, we have 15 minutes. We will open up to audience Q&A. So please drop your question in the chat. I see some questions already here. So Katie asked if in the midst of the pandemic, it can be really difficult to find a mentor. So do you have any recommendations on what we can do, you know, in terms of like, do we reach out to the mentors? How do we reach out to them?
Aside from personal experiences, I will say that if you are a current student and you're on this call, or you're a graduate of UC San Diego and you're on this call, the university has opened up a platform called Triton's Connect, and it's been rolled out for maybe 9 months now. And I highly encourage anybody, alumni or student, to log on to that and become a member. You can do it very easily with if you have a LinkedIn or your Gmail or what have you, and connect quickly. So it's not difficult to do. And the university is aware of this extra challenge right now. And individuals like myself, I'm on the alumni directors team, but I'm also doing outreach with students currently during the pandemic, as are the other alumni directors, some of whom are on the session as well. Kim Peters in physical sciences, I see you there. And we're trying to help bridge some of this gap as well. So alumni are offering to be mentors on Triton's Connect, and it's very easy to see them because there's a willing to help tag on their profile. So that's one way I can share that you can find somebody and you can search by where they live, if maybe you are hoping to move there in the future, or by industry, or by graduation details. So I'll pipe in with that at least. And if anyone else has other, just, you know, from our panelists, if you have ideas of how you would go about this that you think would be helpful, please share.
I'll say really quickly that I was looking for a mentor for something unrelated to work recently, and I found it also really difficult. And I think everybody's sort of dealing with their own stuff during the pandemic. But for better or worse, I had to cast kind of a wide net and just see who would bite. And eventually somebody did bite, but it did take a little bit of perseverance. So not to say that that, you know, isn't something that you've already tried, but from personal experience, that has taken me many months to sometimes seek somebody out. So I sympathize.
Do we have any other questions that you collected on?
Yes, there's one more question specifically for Scripps. So how is Scripps doing in the diversity of their student populations?
This might be a good question for Margaret Lyndon, who is on this session with us. Margaret, would you be willing to share some of the most recent things that you're in discussions about with our student populations?
Sure. I was actually in the middle of writing a response, but this is great. I wish I could say that Scripps student body was at parity with the demographics of the nation, but it's not. We're working to get there, but we've got a long way to go. If we look at all of the underrepresented scholar groups, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and sum them up, they are probably about, I would say, 7% of our student body, of our graduate student body. Undergraduates, well, undergraduates are a little different because we don't get to select undergraduates. The university selects undergraduates and then they pick their majors. But we've been working very hard on this, and really interesting things have happened. So we hired our second Black faculty member earlier, well, just at the end of last year, and he's coming in June. And he did a really interesting Twitter meme to reveal that he had accepted the job. And it was one of those things where he has the sign and, you know, there are a bunch of signs and he drops each one and it says, and guess where I'm going to be a faculty member, Scripps Oceanography. And it was so engaging and everything. And he had like 1,000 responses to that tweet. And by a month afterward, the applications to us for Black graduate students had doubled. So, you know, we're learning that, you know, we need to approach students differently too, to not just assume that they'll find us or they'll look at our website, but to get out there and have our students and our faculty talk about what they're doing on Twitter and say, come be with us.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I actually would like to do one final, I think we've got just 10 more minutes here. I have a question as well, if anyone else isn't going to jump in, but please, if you have any questions, we have only a few minutes, so put them in the chat box. But this might be something that Laura, you can speak to, and Lauren, because you've been on campus most recently, and I know I work with some of these wonderful support groups, but how would you describe some of the different opportunities for seeking support on campus now? And I'm thinking of, you know, we have ombudsman programming, and we have a wonderful WMIS, our Women and Minorities in Science group. Do either of you have any examples of how you participated in groups like that, or how you've seen that engagement help?
Well, I can jump in as the current representative. Yes, definitely. I think the multitude of support groups that UCSD and Scripps have, and also the recent emphasis on really promoting them and just encouraging people to use them, telling everyone in every way possible that these groups exist, really it makes people aware of these opportunities, and also I think makes people more comfortable about reaching out for help and just admitting, you know, you may be struggling with something, or you didn't realize you were struggling with something, and oh yeah, but you are, and so here's an opportunity for it. So I think I, even in my 6 or so years here, have really seen an emphasis in the last 2 years on getting these resources out to people and sort of making them a more common and accessible thing. And I think Laura mentioned WMIS, Women and Minorities in Science, which always advocates that it includes everyone, not just women and not just minorities, but they have really been an important voice over the last couple of years as these issues of racial and gender inequality have really come to the forefront. I think WMIS has been a great channel for people to sort of express their desire for change and to encourage the Scripps administration and everyone to kind of take these things seriously and make these changes, as Director Leinen has highlighted. So I think seeing so much attention to to all these issues in the past couple of years, people being willing to talk about the problems of sexual assault, particularly in field work, but kind of across the board, and inequalities, and then really promoting that these resources exist and where people want to help solve the problems. So.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I was only at Scripps a year, and so I really was got my head down in the books, and then I had to do my big project, so I was very focused. But one thing that I was really lucky about is the culture within my cohort and the surrounding people I was interfacing with. All were a very supportive group of men and women, but there was one woman in particular that I'm thinking of who defined that culture and who empowered others to sort of be like, if if we feel like we need to build this out more, we need to make this more of a thing, you're also responsible for doing that. And so she really encouraged us to not be passive in terms of making our space a more friendly place for women and minorities. And I think that sense of agency is something that I've really carried with me for the rest of my life at Smithsonian, NASA, and wherever else. You can also be that change in your space, even when you don't see it super strong. You know, it's right at the surface, but you can always be the person to cultivate that new culture as well.
Thank you. I certainly am inspired by the groups that I have the chance to connect with on campus. So thank you for sharing some of that, how you see it as well, Laura and Lauren both. I'm sure University of Rhode Island probably has some similar support groups. Karen, are you aware of any where you're at?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's quite so organized.
That means we're ahead of the game at Scripps, Margaret.
The students do have a lot now of a variety of support groups. I think, and at this moment, the faculty need some support groups for teaching online during COVID, but other than that.
Okay, thank you all so very much for being a part of what I think has been a very heartwarming session. But I think, you know, there are some things that to take note here that I'm noticing just looking at the screen, and we're talking about what does it look like when it becomes common that everything is equitable as far as gender. And on this panel, you know, we have all white women. So this is something interesting like going on. I'm glad that we're also discussing, you know, women and minorities in science as a group, that, you know, maybe the next step of that is reaching out and trying to lift up, as all of you have mentioned, and lend a hand to other female scientists that are maybe in the minority populations too, and help them to feel comfortable and supported as well. And I have seen from the different panels I've participated in this conference just today, a lot of that wonderful sentiment. So with that, we have only a few minutes, so I'm just going to open it up. If anybody has any last words of advice or anything that you'd like to share with our session attendees, now's the time. And then I'll do a quick close after that. And Margaret, please, if you'd like to say anything, you're always welcome, please. Yeah, also I see some of our other panelists from earlier sessions. Hello, Ana Luisa. Any words of advice from our panelists?
Hi, thanks so much for having us, and thank you all for sharing your stories. It's incredibly inspiring, and of course my dog chooses the moment that I'm unmuted to start working, so I apologize. What's up, Laura?
We're all family here.
Thank you all. I mean, it's been really fun to hear everybody and all of your thoughts and comments, and yeah, keep in touch.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a delight to talk to everybody. I'm just really, you know, and it's nice that it's so sort of multi-generational. We might not, you know, there's that level of diversity here too, and really look forward to seeing all the wonderful things that Lauren and Laura do, and hearing about maybe things that some of the people who are listening in are going to be doing in the future. But you know, it's great to have big tents and cast wide nets and be really supportive of each other. And I know that, Lauren, you've said so often, both Laura and Lauren, about the, you know, paying it forward. It's really important.
Yes. Thanks to you and Karen, you know, that is a possibility in its own right.
Thank you all. With our last minute here, Laura, Lilly, do you want to say anything?
Oh, thank you. I was classic mute. Yeah, I just wanted to echo Lauren that, you know, I think this panel really highlighted for me how much work the women who have come before us have done, and how much we still have to do, but how much of a difference it makes, and that we really can get toward these these equal vistas. So thank you guys for inspiring me.
And what a great future there is with all of you. So
Woohoo!
There is so much positive energy in this session, I just have to say. We love that. Okay, with that, I think a link just dropped in the chat. There is a networking session for the next 30 minutes. If any of you would like to join that, please do so. There were two other sessions, I believe, also happening alongside this one. So that may have some folks that you haven't seen from this session. Also, special thank you to our moderator, Thank you so much for being a part of this. Having different faces from other parts of campus is really important to make sure that we have a far reach when talking about these things, and we're all doing it together. So with that, thank you all. I really hope that our attendees will visit the conference hub and sign up for some of our amazing sessions and keynotes tomorrow. I'll be there. And big thank you again to everybody who's joined tonight. Thank you, Margaret Leinen. Oh, what an important point, Margaret. Thank you to the men who've joined this panel as well. Your support is absolutely necessary and so appreciated. And hopefully all of us just support one another regardless, right? So with that, thanks everybody. And have a wonderful rest of the evening wherever you are. And we hope to see you tomorrow for day 2 of Triton Leaders Conference. Good night, all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
thanks, Laura. This has been a wonderful session, and everybody else. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Bye.
guys.